spotlight hit Lou Reed like a blade cutting through smoke, and in that moment, somewhere in the 15th row of the Boston Garden, a young woman named Sarah Mitchell felt her knees buckle. It was March 1984, and what happened next would rewrite everything people thought they knew about rock's most dangerous poet. Because the man the world called cold, the artist critics labeled as deliberately cruel, was about to do something that would shatter 20,000 hearts in the most unexpected way. But before we dive into that night, if you want to hear more untold stories about Lou Reed and the legends of rock's underground era, please subscribe to this channel. We bring you the hidden truths, the moments that changed music history, the stories that were there all along, waiting to be told. Understanding what happened in Boston requires understanding who Lou Reed had become by 1984. This wasn't the young poet who'd walked into Andy Warhol's factory 20 years earlier. This wasn't even the glam rock transformer who'd shocked the world with David Bowie in 1972. By the mid-'80s, Lou Reed carried weight, the kind that comes from surviving when survival seemed impossible. The electroshock treatments his parents had forced on him in 1959 had left scars that never fully healed. 25 years later, he still woke up some nights with the phantom sensation of electrodes against his temples, the systematic attempt to erase who he fundamentally was. Those teenage sessions in the psychiatric ward had been designed to cure his attraction to men, to rewire his brain into something his middle-class Jewish family could accept. Instead, they'd created something else entirely. They'd forged a man who understood pain from the inside out, who could translate suffering into 3-minute songs that felt like documentaries from hell's waiting room. When mainstream America was still singing about holding hands, Lou Reed was chronicling the lives of drag queens, dealers, and the desperate. March 17, 1984. St. Patrick's Day in Boston meant green beer and forced celebration. But inside the garden, the crowd gathering for Lou Reed's concert was different. These weren't casual fans. These were the committed. The ones who'd followed him through Metal Machine music, through critical disasters and commercial failures, through every reinvention and rejection. Sarah Mitchell was 23 years old that night, a graduate student at Boston University studying literature. She'd discovered the Velvet Underground through a professor who'd played White Light, White Heat in a seminar on American poetry. The experience had been religious. Here was someone who wrote about the things her own poetry tried to capture: the shadows between streetlights, the beauty in broken people. When she heard Lou Reed was coming to Boston, she'd camped outside the box office to get a ticket. The opening acts had finished. The house lights dropped. Lou Reed walked onto that stage with his guitar slung low, looking like he'd rather be anywhere else, which was somehow part of the appeal. He didn't pander. He didn't smile and wave. The first notes of Sweet Jane cut through the arena, and 20,000 people understood they were in the presence of something rare. Sarah Mitchell was standing in her seat, singing along, feeling that particular electricity that comes from hearing songs you love, performed by the person who created them. She'd been feeling dizzy for the past hour, but had attributed it to excitement. What she didn't know was that her blood sugar had been dropping steadily all day. She'd skipped meals in her nervousness about the concert. Now, as Lou Reed moved into the third song, her vision started to tunnel. It happened during the opening bars of Pale Blue Eyes. Sarah Mitchell's knees simply stopped supporting her weight. She dropped straight down, and the people around her, packed tight in the general admission section, didn't immediately notice. It was only when she hit the concrete floor that her friend Jessica started screaming. Lou Reed was halfway through the first verse when he saw the commotion. From the stage, it looked like a fight breaking out. His first instinct was to ignore it and keep playing. Fights happened at rock shows. Security would handle it. But then he saw something that made him pause. The movement wasn't aggressive. It was panicked. People were trying to make space, not close it. And in the center of the expanding circle, someone was on the ground. He stopped playing mid-line. The band, confused, stumbled to a halt. The sudden silence in the arena was shocking. 20,000 people who'd been singing along a second ago now stood frozen. Lou Reed stepped to the edge of the stage, one hand shielding his eyes from the spotlights, peering out into the crowd. What happened next? Nobody expected. Lou Reed unplugged his guitar, handed it to a stagehand, and walked directly to the front of the stage. Then he sat down, letting his legs dangle over the edge, and pointed at the commotion in the crowd. His voice came through the monitors, quiet but clear in the absolute silence. What's happening down there? Is someone hurt? The question wasn't aggressive or annoyed. It was genuinely concerned, almost gentle, and the crowd heard it. Security was trying to push through to Sarah Mitchell, but the crush of bodies made it difficult. Lou Reed could see that whatever was happening needed more space, more air, more calm. He stood up on the edge of the stage, and in a voice that combined authority with kindness, he spoke directly to his audience. Everyone take 3 steps back. Just 3 steps. Give whoever that is room to breathe. Security's coming through. The crowd responded immediately. In the space of 30 seconds, a circle opened around Sarah Mitchell's unconscious form. But Lou Reed wasn't done. He jumped off the stage. Not a stage dive into waiting hands, but a simple drop onto the arena floor. His security detail tried to intercept him, but he waved them off. The crowd parted as he walked toward the 15th row, toward the unconscious girl surrounded by concerned faces. When he reached the circle around Sarah Mitchell, he knelt down beside her. The medic was checking her pulse, her breathing. Her friend Jessica was crying, saying she didn't know what happened. And Lou Reed, this man who'd built a career on emotional distance, reached out and took Sarah's hand. The medic looked up, startled to see Lou Reed kneeling beside him. Then he went back to his assessment. Her pulse is steady, breathing's normal, probably fainted. Blood sugar, dehydration, something like that. She'll be okay, but we should get her out of here. Lou Reed nodded. He looked at Jessica. You her friend? Jessica could barely speak, just nodded. Okay, you go with her. Make sure she's all right. What's her name? His voice was calm, focused. Sarah, Jessica managed to say. Sarah Mitchell. Lou Reed looked down at Sarah's pale face. She was starting to come around, eyelids fluttering. When she opened her eyes fully and saw Lou Reed holding her hand, her first thought was that she'd died, and this was some very specific version of the afterlife. But the concrete floor was too hard beneath her, the medic's hands too real. You're okay, Lou Reed said, and his voice was so gentle that Sarah Mitchell started crying. Not from pain or fear, but from the overwhelming strangeness of this moment, the impossible kindness in it. You just fainted. Happens at concerts. You'll be fine. He squeezed her hand once, then helped the medic and security lift her onto a stretcher. As they carried her toward the exit, Lou Reed walked alongside, one hand still holding hers, ignoring the 20,000 people watching in absolute silence. At the tunnel leading backstage, he finally let go. He looked at Jessica. Take care of your friend. Make sure she eats something. Drink some water. Then he turned to Sarah. You picked a hell of a time to check out. We were just getting to the good part." He smiled, just a small one, and then he was walking back toward the stage. The audience watched him make that walk in complete silence. They watched him climb back onto the stage, pick up his guitar, adjust the strap. He walked to the microphone and stood there for a moment, just breathing. And then Lou Reed spoke into that silence. "Her name is Sarah. She's going to be okay. But I want to tell you something." He paused, adjusting his dark glasses. "You people, you come to these shows, and I know I don't make it easy. I know the reputation, difficult, confrontational, all that. But the truth is, every single person in this room matters. Every single one of you." The crowd was absolutely still. This wasn't the Lou Reed they'd been told to expect. This was someone else. Someone the electroshock treatments hadn't managed to erase. "I spent a lot of years pretending I didn't need anybody," he continued, and now his voice was rougher. "When I was 17, my parents decided I was broken. They put me in a hospital and ran electricity through my brain to fix me. It didn't work. Couldn't fix something that wasn't broken to begin with. But it taught me that caring, showing you care, that's dangerous. That's how you get hurt." The arena was so quiet you could hear individual breaths. 20,000 people listening to Lou Reed admit to vulnerability. But the thing they didn't understand, the thing I'm still learning, is that caring is also the only thing that matters. The songs I write, they come from caring too much, not too little. About the people on the streets. About being different and being told you're wrong for it. About surviving when survival seems impossible. He looked out at the crowd. "That girl, Sarah, she came here tonight because something in these songs meant something to her. And when she needed help, every single one of you around her tried to help. That's what this is about. That's what it's always been about." He launched into Sweet Jane again, picking up right where he'd left off, but the song sounded different now. The audience wasn't just listening anymore. They were present in a way that transcended normal concert experience. When Lou Reed sang about people who worked hard for their living, it wasn't abstract poetry. It was personal testimony. It was communion. The crowd sang along with a fervor that bordered on religious. When Reed moved into Pale Blue Eyes, people wept openly. The lyrics about thinking of a person constantly, about love that persists despite everything, took on new weight. Between songs, Lou Reed didn't fill the silence with stage patter. He just looked at the audience, acknowledging them, seeing them. Backstage, Sarah Mitchell was sitting in the first aid room, drinking orange juice and eating crackers. Her blood sugar was coming back up. But what was really bringing her back was listening to the concert continue through the speakers. She could hear Lou Reed's voice, could hear the audience singing along, and she understood that somehow her collapse had opened something up. Through the speakers, they heard Lou Reed introducing the next song. "This one's for Sarah. Hope you're feeling better, wherever you are right now." And then he played Satellite of Love. Sarah Mitchell, sitting in that first aid room, started crying again. Grateful tears. The tears of someone who'd been seen and acknowledged by a person whose art had helped her understand herself. The concert ended after midnight. Lou Reed had played for nearly 3 hours. As the house lights came up and the audience filed out, the atmosphere was different from any other concert ending. People weren't just satisfied or entertained. They'd been changed. They'd witnessed something that transcended performance. They'd seen Lou Reed choose connection, choose caring. The story spread quickly. By the next day, people who hadn't been at the concert were calling people who had. Did Lou Reed really jump off stage? Did he really hold a fan's hand? Was it true that he'd talked about his electroshock treatments? The answers were yes, yes, and yes, but the full truth was more complex than any simple retelling could capture. Sarah Mitchell recovered fully and never forgot that night. She became a professor of American literature, and in her classes on confessional poetry, she always spent time on Lou Reed's lyrics. She'd tell her students about the night she collapsed at his concert, about the gentleness in his hand holding hers, about how someone the world called cold had been one of the kindest people she'd ever encountered. Lou Reed never made a big public statement about the Boston concert. In interviews afterward, when journalists asked about it, he'd deflect or change the subject. But those who worked with him noticed a subtle shift. He was still difficult, still exacting, but there was something else there too, a willingness to occasionally let the mask slip. In 2013, when Lou Reed died, the tributes poured in from around the world. But among the thousands of remembrances, one stood out. Sarah Mitchell wrote a short essay about that night in Boston. She described what it meant to have Lou Reed stop a concert for her, to have him hold her hand, to show that beneath everything, he cared deeply about the people who connected with his music. The Boston Garden Concert of March 1984 wasn't Lou Reed's most famous performance. It didn't produce any legendary recordings, but for the 20,000 people there that night, it was transformative. They'd come to see a rock legend, and instead witnessed a human being choosing to prioritize someone else's well-being over his own image, over the show's momentum. The moment when Lou Reed jumped off that stage and knelt beside an unconscious fan contained everything his best songs had always been about. Connection in a disconnected world, caring for people society dismisses, recognizing that everyone, no matter how weird or different or damaged, deserves to be seen and valued. When Reed died, Sarah Mitchell flew to New York for the public memorial. She stood among thousands of mourners in the autumn rain, listening to Laurie Anderson speak about her late husband, about his kindness, his complexity, his capacity for love that he'd worked so hard to hide. And Sarah thought about that night in Boston, about the feeling of his hand in hers, about his voice saying, "You're okay." And she understood that Lou Reed's greatest achievement wasn't any single song or album. His greatest achievement was surviving the attempts to break him, the electroshock treatments designed to erase who he was, the decades of pressure to conform. And having survived all of that, choosing occasionally, in moments that mattered, to let people see the tenderness he'd protected so fiercely for so long. The spotlight that hit Lou Reed that night in Boston revealed more than just a performer on a stage. It revealed a survivor, a poet, a wounded healer who understood that the only response to a world that wants to break you is to remain, despite everything, stubbornly, defiantly, impossibly kind.